Ever feel like your mix is just missing that dynamic edge? Automation is the answer. All right, so when I first started mixing, automation was one of the few things that I learned last. And it was one of the things that I felt was a bit esoteric for me to really understand. I had a hard time kind of implementing automation. I didn't really know what to automate, where to automate, what elements. I mean, we have so much choice nowadays that you can automate practically anything, your EQs, your compressors, anything that you really feel needs to be automated. But personally, I have found that the most simple methods tend to be the most effective. And for me, that's always going to be volume automation. Once you kind of get your mix sounding where you want it to be, we have compressed and EQ'd everything so much that the dynamics of the mix tend to be kind of squeezed out of every inch of the mix. And with that, you want to reintroduce some of that dynamic movement with volume automation. And I have a very specific way of doing that. I usually work in order from the drums to the bass to the guitars to the vocals, moving down from each element of the mix. That being said, we have a song here from my friend Joseph. He has a band called River Gorger. This is a single that they're going to be planning on releasing, and it's a little bit different than what I usually mix. It's not metal. I'm not really sure what it is, but it's a great song. Let me play you a little bit of the song so you guys have an idea of what we're working with, and then I'm going to jump into the overall strategy and show you guys the tactics of how I would do some volume automation. So it's this really weird prog rock kind of spacey sound band that they got going on. It's really cool. I really like it. All right, so the overall strategy for me when it comes to volume automation is to bring up certain elements that I want the listener to pay attention to and to provide a more dynamic listening experience for the listener. So when it comes down to it, you guys got to start thinking of the ebb and flow of your song. You have to remove your mixing engineer hat and put on your listener and producer hat and think about where the energy needs to go in the song. So you have to switch off the part of your brain that is technical and switch more to the artist side of things. And at that point, you're going to start listening for things like, oh, maybe the bass should come up a little bit here in this section. Maybe the guitars can come down in this section. I feel like the kick drum should be coming up in the chorus section, so it sounds like he's playing a little bit harder, etc. and etc. Now, I have already created some automation lanes in this mix. I'm going to just briefly go over them and explain some of the decisions I've made, and then I'll play you guys a few samples of the audio with and without the automation. So let's go ahead and jump right over to the kick here. Now, I don't know if you guys can see these, but these little white dots on my screen are automation points that I have programmed into my volume fader. So this automation lane is strictly for volume, controlling the fader on my channel. I decided to control the ebb and flow of the kick drum with this. So in certain sections, I preferred it to be lower in volume, while in certain sections, I preferred it to be higher in volume. Now, the reason for that is because certain sections were a little bit more relaxed and certain sections were a little bit more up front. So I'm going to play you guys that beginning section again, and I want you to kind of follow the automation lanes with your eyes, but while paying attention with your ears as well, so you guys can kind of hear what I'm talking about in regards to the dynamics that you can reintroduce using volume automation. So as you can clearly hear there, in the first half of that section, the kick drum was a little bit lower in volume, but when everything jumped in, the kick drum was going to get lost in the mix. So I decided to bring it up and automate the volume so that it could be audible in that section. And it also sounded like he was playing a lot harder during that section, which is what you want, because that was a big section where all the guitars are in place, the bass is being played really hard, and etc., etc. There's certain other sections as well that was unique that I actually haven't really experimented with before, specifically this area here at the very end. This is a very relaxed part of the song. It's not a lot of, there's not a lot of stuff going on. So the kick sample that I used needed to come down in volume substantially to make room for the more natural kick drum to provide a more softer kick sound during this section, as the sample was providing way too much body and high end that was unnecessary for this particular section of the song. So let's go ahead and play that section here. So as you can hear, the kick is a much softer character, and there's not a lot of body that was being introduced from the sample. In fact, I even took the liberty of automating the volume down as well to provide an even more softer character to the kick drum. So that is just kick drum. And to be quite honest with you guys, automation does not have to be complicated. In my opinion, when you have too many crazy automation lanes, you know, you start getting lost in things that are not of the big picture. As you can see here, my automation lanes are pretty black and white, up, down, and that's it. There is no trying to ride the fader. Now, when it comes to overheads, that's a bit of a slightly different story, but we'll get to that point in a little bit. All right, moving on to snare drum. Now, the snare drum, I tend to automate volume is very similarly to a kick drum. So certain sections are going to be brought down in volume and certain sections are going to be brought up in volume. As you can see here on my automation lanes, I've decided that certain areas needed the snare to be a bit louder, while certain other areas needed to be brought down in volume. So let's go through a section here in the beginning and just check out the volume from the snare. From this one section to the second section, it's going to be dropping in volume ever so slightly. And if you're curious, you can also check out the channel here where the volume is presented in decibels, and you can see how the volume goes up and down. All right, so that wasn't as drastic as the kick drum because I'm only bringing up the snare in that first section by a half a dB maybe, and then just bringing it back down to normal. That half dB does make a difference though, because snare is pretty aggressive and it just needs that little bit of extra push to cut through the mix. Now, moving on to overheads. Overheads are the most unique part of my volume automation routine. It's really the only automation routine that I have that is done by manual mode, not drawing in with the pencil or anything like that. I have a fader that is on my desk here, and I basically just play the entirety of the track, moving the fader up and down as needed when I need certain hits of the crashes to go up or I need them to come down in volume. The cymbals weren't recorded very well, so I had to do quite a bit more automation than I'm used to on overheads, but nevertheless, this is pretty normal for a track like this. If this was like a death metal, technical death metal kind of track, there would be way more automation going on my overheads, and I would probably have to play the song a couple times in passing to get every hit and everything that I may have missed on the first couple passes. So again, overheads for me, I do it by manual, by playing through the song and using the physical fader here that I have on my desk, just riding the cymbal hits with the fader up and down as needed. So let's go ahead and play a section here where that is showcased and just see how odd these automation lanes are, but you'll hear that the crashes do jump up in slight volume when they come by, and they just drop down ever so slightly when they pass by. There was no way in hell that those would have been heard had I not automated them up ever so slightly above the mix. Okay, maybe they would have been heard, but they wouldn't have had the impact as if he's hitting them harder in those sections than if I hadn't automated the volume. All right, so the key takeaway to all of this is that automation can make your mix feel alive. It's not about just the technical side of things, but the emotion that you guys can bring forth using automation, and as well as the manipulation of emotions using automation that you can achieve. So if you found this video helpful, give me a like, comment, and subscribe. It's going to help me more than you guys know, and I'll catch you guys in the next